death toll on Everest has hit double digits in 2023, already marking it as one of the deadliest years on the mountain. Over the last 50 years, the average deaths per year on Mount Everest is approximately 5. We are more than double that number this year, with over 600 climbers reaching the summit. The number of climbers on the mountain continues to rise as the world views Everest as more of a tourist attraction, rather than the deadly mountain it is. But if you mess with the mountain, you may never return home. 2 more families are stuck with the reality that their loved ones are not coming off the tallest peak in the world. This is their story. Today on Terminal Defect, we will be uncovering the deadliest events of Mount Everest happened in 2023. Mount Everest has an issue. There are simply too many people on the mountain at any one point in time, and we are seeing the effects of this. There is a record number of traffic, supplies, and human waste being left behind, and 13 climbers have lost their lives on the mountain this year. Nepal issued 478 permits to 47 teams, and with 1.5 Sherpas assisting each climber, this is over 1 to 200 people on the mountain, a record number. This is mainly to uphold their economy, as they rely heavily on the income generated by climbers willing to spend thousands to have a chance of reaching the tallest point on Earth. Not only permit fees, but also the revenue generated for Sherpas, hotels, taxis, and vendors on the street. We can all agree that many of these people rely on the income from climbers, and don't get me started on the pay of Sherpas. So, it seems like a necessary evil, but what can we do to reduce the risk of the mountain and, maybe more importantly, take care of Mother Nature? Well, there are initiatives to clean the mountains, such as the Nepal Army Mountain Cleanup Campaign. But, as we saw this year, one of the Sherpas, a part of this initiative, sadly passed away on May 16th. The reality is that the permits are only increasing, and this means more people who are not ready to climb Everest will be testing their luck, not only increasing the risk for themselves, but also those that are already trying to achieve a lifelong dream. Dr. Peter Sword was an anesthesiologist from Canada who was ready to fulfill his goal of reaching the highest point in the world. Peter, originally from South Africa, had started climbing at the age of 9, and since then, grew up with the desire of taking on Everest. While Peter developed a love for climbing at an early age, it would take a back seat to his career and family. But, after graduating medical school in South Africa, moving to Canada, creating a successful anesthesiology practice, marrying the love of his life, Saritha, and becoming a father of 2, he would once again find an unquenchable thirst to climb. After years of training in 2019, at the age of 59, Peter would take on the tallest peak in North America, Denali. He would successfully summit the 6,190.5 meter peak and celebrate one of the greatest moments of his life. But the thirst would continue, as Peter would move his sights to Everest. He would decide to make the trip to Everest with Madison Mountaineering. Peter would be climbing up the southeast route through Nepal and be following the usual acclimatization schedule, which consisted of multiple trips on the mountain, each time reaching a higher point, spending some time at the higher altitude, and then descending back to base camp to rest. This photo, taken by legendary climber Garrett Madison, showed Peter on April 28th traversing through the Khumbu icefall on one of these acclimatization trips. And on May 16th, Peter would post his own photo to his Instagram of him once again traversing the icefall for the final time as they were beginning to make a summit push. The caption would read, "Ice climbing in the Khumbu icefall today. Perfect day to climb up the mountain." It would be pretty standard, and the team would arrive at Camp 4 just under the death zone at 7,150 meters without incident. They would be preparing for the final summit push, and this is where the details get a little fuzzy. It is not clear if Peter did summit, but after entering the death zone, he would begin to develop a dry cough that others would notice. And because of the altitude, he would quickly develop respiratory issues. We all know the dangers of the death zone, where the oxygen is a third of what it is at sea level. But trying to climb the world's tallest peak with respiratory issues? Well, it's not a good combo. Peter would have to descend the mountain, but his condition would only worsen to the point where his body could barely function. After traversing back to Camp 4, and on the descent to Camp 3 at 7,300 meters. Just before reaching the safety of the tents, Peter's body would unfortunately collapse. The 63-year-old would pass away soon after. The outpour of support from family and friends would soon follow, with a colleague of Peter describing Peter's sense of humor as second to none. Laughing was always part of the encounter, and you always parted smiling. He was a trusted friend to many. I don't believe Peter's story is one of a climber not ready to take on Everest, but more so the unfortunate reality that you can prepare your entire life, and sometimes, Mother Nature just doesn't care. But Peter would die chasing a dream, and there were a lot worse ways to go. Jason Kinnison's story to reach Everest was vastly different from Peter's. In fact, he was never even supposed to have made it to Everest. But the 40-year-old wanted to summit the world's tallest peak for charity. After disaster struck in 2006, Jason would be involved in a serious truck crash that would leave him with a broken leg, damaged shoulders, and after a routine operation, he would suffer from spinal cord damage. This would cause him to be stuck in a wheelchair. Doctors told him that he may never walk again, but Jason would begin rehab immediately, and within months, there would be a significant improvement in his condition. He would have to relearn how to walk, and that's exactly what he did. A year after his injury, he would return back to work in the mines, but it would take years before he was fully healed, and he never would be the same mentally. While I think Jason could describe it best, looking back, it took a lot of my confidence, my self-esteem.
Looking back, it took a lot of my confidence, my self-esteem. I think each injury that I had, and that really affected, I guess, made me a bit more insecure.
He wanted to climb Everest not only because it was a dream of his, but to show that he could, and to raise awareness around spinal cord injuries. He should have never even made it to the mountain, but the fact that he did was an achievement within itself. Jason would be climbing with Asian trekking, and had prepared by setting up a ladder in his backyard to become comfortable with traversing on the rungs. He would also travel to New Zealand before the expedition to practice rock climbing and altitude climbing. Similar to our first story, Jason would have no issues acclimatizing to the mountain. In late May, there was predicted to be a clear weather window, to which the group would finally prepare for the summit push. After making their way through the Khumbu icefall and up the mountain to the various camps, Jason felt good. His body was strong from all the training and preparation. They would make it to Camp 4, just under the death zone on May 18th, and like most climbers, get a small amount of rest before making the final push. In the early hours of the morning, Jason would stand on the roof of the world on May 19th, once again proving just how much grit and determination he had, along with being an inspiration for so many. But as we all know, reaching the top of Everest is only half the battle. On the descent, Jason began showing some concerning symptoms, mainly around hallucination and confusion. To make matters worse, the two Sherpas that were with Jason were running out of oxygen canisters. Now, it is unclear if they were out of oxygen because of a lack of planning, or if their pace was just too slow. But this would only spiral Jason's condition, and shortly after reaching the balcony, one of the more difficult areas on the mountain, Jason would begin to refuse to climb. He was suffering from high-altitude cerebral edema, or HACE, a condition in which the brain swells from a lack of oxygen, causing irrational behaviors and thoughts until ultimately, the body begins to shut down. The two Sherpas would make the decision to return to Camp 4 ahead of Jason to retrieve more oxygen canisters before returning back to him. But because of a quick change in the weather, while the Sherpas were at Camp 4, a climb back up to Jason was impossible. Unfortunately, Jason would collapse just above the balcony at 8,500 meters and would sadly take his final breath. Like most climbers who would sadly perish in the death zone, nobody would be able to retrieve Jason's body, a sad reality that all climbers must face, forever being trapped above 8,000 meters. Jason's family would put out some touching comments, with his mother remembering her final words to her son. And I said, "Well, just remember, Jason, please take it easy, take care, and remember, I'll always love you." And that was the last word we said. It's hard to deny his accomplishments, and even Jason's brother, Adrian, would state, he made it in high spirits, doing what he wanted. There was the climb up. He had his photo on top of the summit. I do believe there is no denying that Jason achieved exactly what he wanted to. This season left many professionals on the outside, fearful that we would have déjà vu of 2019, with long lines of climbers seeking to reach the summit. But even with record numbers of climbers, we just didn't see this, mainly in part to the colder weather that sent a higher number of climbers home mid-season, many with a persistent virus that was traveling around camps. But the reality still remains that there are more climbers on the mountain than ever before, and with that comes risk. There is no denying the rise in deaths, making it one of the deadliest seasons in the mountain's history. But the question still remains, what is next for the king of all mountains? That's all from Terminal Defect. Please like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification for more amazing content. Thanks for watching.